Around here, attitude is enough to put a man in cuffs, Sheriff Wade Callahan said, loud enough for the people outside Millstone Diner to hear, as if humiliation became lawful when it had an audience. Elias Brooks stood beside his dark sedan in the gravel parking lot, one hand resting calmly against the roof, the other visible at his side, the morning sun catching the edge of the locked briefing case on the passenger seat behind the half-open door. He was 46, black, dressed in a plain charcoal jacket, clean brown shoes, and a white shirt with no tie, the kind of man most people would pass without knowing he had spent half his adult life in rooms where silence meant national security and careless words could move aircraft, soldiers, and satellites. Sheriff Callahan did not know that. Or maybe, Elias thought, he did not want to know anything that might complicate the version of the story already forming behind his mirrored sunglasses. The sheriff was 52, white, broad-bellied, square-jawed, and polished in the way local power often polished itself. Bright badge, press 10 uniform, campaign smile when cameras were near, hard eyes when they were not. His cruiser blocked the sedan at an angle, blue lights flashing without sound against the diner windows. A waitress stood frozen near the glass door with a coffee pot in her hand. Two farmers at a pickup truck watched without stepping closer. Deputy Cole Turner, younger and uneasy, stood near the front bumper with his notebook open, waiting for a charge that had not yet been named. Elias kept his voice even. "Sheriff, I am asking why I am being detained." Callahan smiled like the question amused him. "Because I asked what was in the case, and you gave me attitude. I said the case contains materials I am not authorized to discuss on a roadside." "That sounds like attitude to me." Elias looked toward the sheriff's body camera. "Please state the legal reason for detention on the recording." The smile left Callahan's face. A passing truck rolled by on County Route 19, stirring dust across the diner lot, lifting the corner of a paper napkin near Elias's shoe. The morning had been ordinary 6 minutes earlier. Elias had stopped for coffee on his way to a defense coordination site 22 miles north, where his clearance badge, sealed document pouch, and briefing schedule were expected before noon. He had parked straight, bought black coffee, thanked the waitress, and returned to his car. Callahan had followed him out, asking why a stranger was carrying a locked case in his county, why he was in a hurry, why he did not answer like a man who understood who was asking. Elias had answered each question carefully because he knew the danger of letting anger write a report before truth arrived. But careful answers had only made Callahan more certain he was being disrespected. Now the sheriff stepped closer and lifted his hand toward the cuffs on his belt. "Turn around." Deputy Turner looked up quickly. "Sheriff, what are we charging him with?" Callahan did not look at him. "Failure to respect lawful authority." Elias held Callahan's gaze for one quiet second, then slowly turned, placing both hands where they could be seen. "Put that exact phrase in the report," he said. Callahan's jaw tightened. The diner lot went silent except for the low buzz of the neon sign and the soft click of metal closing around Elias's wrists. No one moved toward the locked case. No one asked why the man being arrested still sounded calmer than the man arresting him. Elias looked at the reflection of the flashing lights in the diner window and said, "Also document that I requested body camera preservation before transport." Callahan leaned close enough for only Elias and the camera to hear. "You are not as important as you think you are." Elias looked straight ahead, breathing slowly. "That is not what matters," he said. "The record is." Elias Brooks had spent years learning how to carry important things without looking important. That morning, the locked briefing case on the passenger seat looked plain from the outside, matte black with a silver latch and a small Federal Transport seal near the handle. It did not flash, beep, or announce itself. It simply waited, the way serious work often waited, quiet and unforgiving. Beside it lay his clearance badge, a sealed document pouch, a printed itinerary, and a folded receipt from Millstone Diner with one black coffee circled in blue ink by the waitress who had wished him a safe drive. 22 miles north, a defense coordination site expected him before noon for a classified systems review connected to military communications infrastructure. Elias was no longer in uniform, but discipline had not left him when he retired from the Air Force. It lived in the way he checked his mirrors, the way he kept documents in order, the way he answered questions without giving away more than law and clearance allowed. He had served as an intelligence officer long enough to understand that not every truth could be explained to the first person who demanded it. Some information had rules. Some silence was not defiance. It was duty. But Sheriff Callahan had looked at that silence and called it attitude. Now Elias stood beside the cruiser with his wrists secured behind him, the gravel warm beneath his shoes, the diner window reflecting blue lights across his face. He did not pull away. He did not raise his voice. He watched Deputy Turner open the sedan door carefully and lean toward the passenger seat. "Deputy," Elias said, calm but firm, "that case should not be opened without proper federal authority. The badge and sealed pouch identify transport status. Please inventory the property without breaking the seal." Turner paused. The younger deputy looked at the case, then at the badge, then at Sheriff Callahan. Something in his face shifted, the first small recognition that the stop might be larger than the sheriff wanted it to be. Callahan snorted. "You hear that? Now he is giving legal instructions." "I am requesting proper property handling," Elias said. "Please document that request." Callahan stepped closer, voice carrying toward the diner door where the waitress still stood frozen with the coffee pot lowered at her side. "You people always know just enough words to make a simple thing difficult." The sentence landed in the dust between them. Turner looked down. The farmers by the pickup truck stopped pretending not to hear. Elias felt the old familiar heat rise in his chest, not from fear, but from the insult wearing a badge as clothing. He let it pass through him without giving it control of his face. His father had taught him that when Elias was 17, standing on their porch after a traffic stop had left him shaking with anger. Never hand anger the pen when truth can sign its own name. Elias looked at the body camera again. "Please preserve that statement as well." Callahan's smile tightened. He reached into the sedan himself, lifted the locked briefing case by the handle, and held it up as if he had found proof instead of responsibility. "We will see what is so secret once we get to my office." Elias turned his head enough to meet the sheriff's eyes. "Sheriff, opening that case without lawful authority will create a record you cannot control." For the first time, Callahan's expression flickered, but pride closed over it quickly. "Load him in," he said to Turner. The deputy hesitated only a second before opening the rear door of the cruiser. Elias stepped in carefully, keeping his posture straight, his breathing steady, his eyes on the locked case now carried toward the trunk. The diner, the dust, the witnesses, the body camera, the badge on the seat, all of it had become part of the morning's memory. Elias knew the truth was already moving, even if no one there could hear its footsteps yet. Sheriff Wade Callahan had always loved the sound of his own office door opening. At the Millstone County Sheriff's Office, that door made a heavy wooden creak before swinging into a room built to remind visitors who held power there. County flags stood in the corners. Framed campaign photographs lined the wall behind his desk, each one showing Callahan smiling beside church leaders, business owners, hunting clubs, and men who shook his hand like the county itself had chosen him personally. A polished plaque read Law and Order. A rack of old case files sat beneath it, dusty at the edges but displayed like proof of a lifetime spent being right. Callahan walked Elias Brooks through the front entrance with one hand resting near his belt, chin lifted, boots loud on the tile floor. The secretary looked up from her computer, then quickly looked away. Two deputies near the coffee machine stopped talking. Deputy Turner followed behind with the locked briefing case, carrying it more carefully now, his eyes moving between the federal transport seal and the sheriff's back. To Callahan, the office was more than a workplace. It was his house, his stage, his courtroom before any judge could enter one. He believed people should lower their voices inside it. He believed strangers should answer faster. He believed respect was something owed to his badge before his conduct had earned it. And when a black man in a plain charcoal jacket stood too calmly in front of him, asking for legal reasons, property logs, and camera preservation, Callahan felt that calm as an insult. "Put him in holding," he said. "Then inventory the car and the case." Elias stopped just before Turner guided him toward the small holding room. "Sheriff, I am requesting that the booking reason be stated clearly before I am placed in a cell." Callahan turned, smiling with his teeth but not his eyes. "Still talking. Still requesting the record," Elias said. A deputy near the coffee machine gave a quiet laugh, but it faded when Elias looked at him without anger. There was something difficult to mock about a man who refused to perform fear for the room. Callahan stepped closer. "You walked around my county with a locked case, refused to answer basic questions, and acted like my badge was beneath you. I answered within the limits of my authorization. That is what I mean." Elias glanced at the ceiling camera in the hallway, then toward Turner's notebook. "Please document that the arrest is based on my failure to satisfy your personal expectation of respect, not on an identified offense." The room tightened. Turner's pen hovered above the page. Callahan's face darkened, not with uncertainty, but with the anger of a man hearing his own logic repeated too clearly. "Write failure to comply," he told Turner. Turner swallowed. "Sheriff, he did comply with the arrest." "Then write obstruction." "Obstruction of what?" The question came out softer than defiance, but it was enough to make every deputy in the room turn. Callahan stared at Turner as if the younger man had forgotten where he was standing. Elias said nothing. He did not rescue Turner from the silence, or push him deeper into it. He simply stood under the fluorescent lights, wrists secured, posture straight, eyes steady. Callahan took the locked case from Turner and set it on his desk with a hard sound that made the silver latch tremble. "Fine," he said. "We will find out what he is obstructing." Elias looked at the sealed pouch, the transport mark, the badge now placed beside the case, and the campaign photographs watching from the wall. "Sheriff," he said quietly, "some doors should not be opened just because a man dislikes being questioned." Callahan leaned over the case, his reflection bent across the black surface. "In my county," he said, "I decide which doors open." Elias breathed once, slow and even. Outside the office window, the diner dust still clung to the cruiser's tires. Inside, the clock above the booking desk moved forward, second by second, toward a call Callahan did not know was already coming. Elias Brooks watched Sheriff Callahan's hand rest on the locked briefing case, as if the black metal box had personally insulted him. The case sat on the sheriff's desk beneath the framed campaign photographs, its federal transport seal small but clear beside the handle, its silver latch still closed, its surface reflecting the overhead fluorescent lights in dull rectangles. Deputy Turner stood near the corner with the property inventory sheet, pen ready, face uneasy. The other deputies had grown quieter now that the arrest was no longer a diner parking lot performance but a procedure with cameras, logs, and a sealed item no one fully understood. Callahan opened a drawer and pulled out a property tag. "Case black locked," he said. "Owner refuses access." Elias stood near the holding room door, wrist still secured, posture straight. "Owner has stated the case contains materials connected to federal defense coordination and should not be opened without lawful authority." Callahan looked up slowly. "You keep saying federal like it scares me. It should remind you to slow down." Turner's pen stopped. The office air seemed to cool around the sentence. Callahan smiled, but it was thinner than before. "You talk like a lawyer. I talk like a man asking you to write down what you are doing before you do it." The secretary glanced toward the ceiling camera above the booking desk. Elias noticed. So did Turner. Callahan did not, or he pretended not to. He picked up Elias's clearance badge from the desk and turned it in his fingers. The badge showed a plain photograph, a barcode, and agency markings that made Turner's eyes narrow with concern. Beside it lay the sealed document pouch, still closed, still marked for authorized handling. "Anybody can print a badge," Callahan said. "Then verify it through the proper channel," Elias answered. "The contact number is listed in the itinerary." I do not take instructions from people I arrest. Then take instruction from your own policy. For a moment, no one moved. The office smelled of old coffee, floor wax, dust, and heat from the cruiser engine still ticking outside. A wall clock clicked above the booking desk, each second making the sheriff's certainty feel more expensive. Callahan turned toward Turner. Inventory the contents. Turner looked from the case to the sheriff. Sheriff, if the seal is federal, we should probably call state police or the number on the itinerary before opening it. Callahan's eyes hardened. I said inventory it. Inventory does not require breaking the seal, Elias said. His voice remained even, but the room heard the line. You can document the case, the seal, the badge, and the pouch without accessing restricted contents. Callahan stepped away from the desk and walked toward Elias until only a few feet separated them. You are in my office, in my county, wearing my cuffs, and you still think you get to run the room. Elias looked at the body camera on the sheriff's chest, then at Turner's property sheet. No. I think the room is recording who is running it. The words landed with no volume, and no apology. Callahan's jaw flexed. He turned back to the desk, grabbed the case by the handle, and set it closer to the edge. The latch gave a soft metallic tap, not opening, only reminding everyone that a boundary existed. Put him in holding, Callahan said. Maybe a few minutes alone will help his attitude. Turner did not move right away. What is the booking reason? Callahan did not turn. Failure to comply. He complied with transport. Obstruction. The report needs an action. Callahan spun toward him. The action is he would not answer my questions. Elias spoke before the silence could swallow the truth. I answered that I was not authorized to discuss the contents of the case on a roadside or in this office without proper authority. Please include that. Turner wrote it down. The sound of the pen against paper was small, but it changed something. Callahan saw it and understood that the record was beginning to form without his permission. He pointed toward the holding room. Turner guided Elias inside, careful now, almost respectful. The room was narrow, with a metal bench, pale walls, and a window looking back into the office. Elias sat slowly, the fluorescent light flattening every shadow across his face. Through the glass, he could see the locked case still sealed on the sheriff's desk. Callahan stood over it, pride leaning toward a door it did not have authority to open. Elias lowered his eyes to his own hands, breathed once, and waited for truth to arrive by phone. The holding room door closed with a soft mechanical click, and the sound seemed to give Sheriff Callahan permission to become louder again. Through the square glass window, Elias Brooks watched him stand over the locked briefing case as if the desk itself were a courtroom, and the case were the defendant. The office beyond the glass carried on in uneasy pieces, a dispatcher answering phones, the secretary pretending to type, Deputy Turner rewriting the property inventory line by line, two deputies near the coffee machine suddenly interested in their cups. No one laughed now. The case had changed the temperature. Its federal transport seal remained untouched, small and white against the black metal, but Callahan kept looking at it with the kind of irritation men reserve for limits they did not expect to meet. Elias sat on the metal bench, shoulders straight, wrists resting carefully in front of him after Turner had adjusted the cuffs to the front for documentation and comfort. There was a faint pressure around his skin, not serious, only present, a reminder that a man could be physically still while the truth kept moving without him. The fluorescent light hummed above him. A wall clock in the outer office clicked with ordinary cruelty. 5 minutes could feel like nothing in a life, but inside a holding room, 5 minutes became a scale for measuring who trusted power and who trusted record. Callahan picked up the sealed document pouch and turned it over. "This is ridiculous," he said. "A man drives through my county with a mystery case and expects me to bow to a sticker." Turner kept his voice careful. "Sheriff, the itinerary has a verification number." "I know what it has." "Then maybe we should call it." Callahan turned slowly. "Are you his deputy or mine?" Turner looked down at the inventory sheet. "I am trying to keep the evidence clean." The words hung in the office like a door opened only an inch. Elias looked through the glass at the young deputy, and for the first time that morning, he saw courage taking the shape of procedure rather than apology. Callahan reached for the case latch. Turner stepped half a pace forward. "Sheriff, do not break the seal until we verify authority." Callahan's hand stopped, not because he agreed, but because the room had heard the warning. At that exact moment, Elias's phone began vibrating inside the property tray. The screen lit up with Mara Brooks's name. His wife had likely seen he had missed the check-in call he always made after long drives through rural counties. Mara was a nurse practitioner, calm under pressure, but she knew enough about Elias's work to know that silence at the wrong hour meant something had gone wrong. The dispatcher looked at the phone. "Sheriff, someone named Mara Brooks is calling." Callahan did not even glance at Elias. "Let it ring." Elias watched the screen glow, then fade. A quiet ache moved through him, not from fear, but from knowing Mara would be standing in their kitchen now, one hand on the counter, listening to unanswered rings and making decisions faster than most people made coffee. Callahan tapped the case with one finger. "Maybe his wife can explain what he thinks he is hiding." Elias leaned slightly toward the glass. "Sheriff, do not involve my wife in your attempt to justify an unlawful search." Callahan smiled toward him. "There is that attitude again." Elias did not answer. He let the word fall where it belonged, beside the false charge, the untouched case, the ignored call, and the inventory sheet Turner was now marking with exact times. The phone on the sheriff's desk rang next, sharper than the others, an inside line from dispatch. The dispatcher answered, listened, and her face changed before her voice did. She covered the receiver and looked toward Callahan. "Sheriff," she said, suddenly careful, "there is a federal liaison asking for you. She says she is calling from the Pentagon." Callahan's hand slipped away from the latch. For 1 second, the whole office forgot how to breathe. Elias lowered his eyes, not in victory, but in recognition. Truth had not arrived loudly. It had simply found the right number. The words from dispatch did not explode through the office. They settled. That made them worse for Sheriff Callahan. "A federal liaison asking for you. Calling from the Pentagon." The sentence seemed to move from desk to desk, from the secretary's pale fingers on the receiver to Deputy Turner's still pen, to the sealed case beneath the fluorescent light, to the holding room window where Elias Brooks sat quietly with his hands resting in front of him. For 5 minutes, Callahan had owned the room because everyone inside it had agreed to treat his confidence like proof. Now a phone call had entered without raising its voice, and the room no longer knew where to place him. Callahan adjusted his belt, cleared his throat, and walked to the desk with the stiff pace of a man trying not to hurry. "Put her through," he said. The dispatcher pressed a button, and the speakerphone clicked once. A woman's voice came through, crisp, controlled, and empty of fear. "Sheriff Callahan, this is Colonel Rebecca Shaw with the Pentagon Liaison Office. I need confirmation that Elias Brooks is currently in your custody." Callahan looked toward the holding room window. Elias did not move. "We have a man by that name here," Callahan said. "He was detained during a local investigation." "On what charge?" Callahan's eyes shifted to Turner's notebook. "Failure to comply." Turner looked down at the page where the words had already begun to lose their shape. The colonel's voice remained level. "Failure to comply with what specific lawful order?" The office went still again. Outside, a car passed on the street, its tires making a faint sound against pavement. Inside, the wall clock continued clicking like it had no respect for embarrassment. Callahan touched the edge of the desk. He refused to explain the contents of a locked case. Was the case marked with a federal transport seal? Callahan did not answer quickly enough. Turner did. "Yes, ma'am." Callahan turned sharply, but the word had already gone into the line. Colonel Shaw continued. "Was there a clearance badge, sealed document pouch, an itinerary with verification contact information?" Turner swallowed. "Yes, ma'am." The colonel's voice did not rise. That was what made it impossible to dismiss. Mr. Brooks is an authorized civilian defense contractor expected at a classified coordination site today. His transport was scheduled, verified, and time-sensitive. I need to know why his secure movement was interrupted for what your dispatcher described as attitude. The last word landed with surgical precision. Elias looked at the floor, not because he was ashamed, but because pride was not the work. The work was the record. In the holding room, the fluorescent light hummed above him and washed the pale walls flat. He felt the dull pressure at his wrists, the stiffness in his shoulders, the quiet ache of being measured first by suspicion and only later by credentials. He thought of his father on that old porch years ago, voice tired but steady after a traffic stop had taught Elias too young how quickly dignity could be renamed defiance. Never hand anger the pen when truth can sign its own name. Elias had wanted to be believed before the Pentagon called. That was the part no title could repair. Through the glass, he watched Callahan stare at the locked case, no longer as if it were a challenge, but as if it had become evidence against him. Colonel Shaw spoke again. "Sheriff, do not open the case. Do not access the pouch. Do not alter the property inventory. Preserve body camera footage, holding room video, dispatch logs, arrest notes, and every timestamp connected to this detention." Deputy Turner began writing faster now, every word clean, every second named. Callahan's face tightened, but his voice had lost the room. "Colonel, we were acting under local authority. Local authority does not exempt you from articulating a lawful basis," she said. Elias lifted his eyes then. The locked case remained sealed on the desk. The badge lay beside it. The phone line held the office in place. And for the first time that morning, the silence around him did not feel like isolation. It felt like truth standing up slowly, using its full name. Colonel Rebecca Shaw did not need to threaten Sheriff Callahan for the room to understand that something larger than county pride had entered it. Her voice came through the speakerphone with the clean pressure of official procedure, each word measured, each request impossible to brush aside. "Sheriff, I need Mr. Brooks' release from holding while this matter is reviewed. His property must remain sealed and documented. Deputy Turner, are you able to confirm the case has not been opened?" Turner looked at the black briefing case on the desk, then at the federal transport seal still intact near the handle. "Yes, Colonel. The case has not been opened. The seal is intact. Read the seal number into the record." Callahan turned toward him with a look that could have stopped a weaker conscience, but Turner's pen was already moving, and his voice, though quiet, did not break. He read the number slowly. The dispatcher typed it into the call log. The secretary watched the sealing camera as if seeing it for the first time. Elias Brooks sat behind the holding room glass, listening to the small machinery of truth begin to work. Seal number, time of detention, property inventory, body camera preservation, dispatch entry, lawful basis requested. None of it was dramatic by itself. Together, it was stronger than shouting. Callahan gripped the edge of his desk. "Colonel, with respect, this man was uncooperative." Colonel Shaw paused just long enough for the word to show its emptiness. "Sheriff, refusing to disclose restricted material to an unauthorized officer is not uncooperative. It is compliance with federal handling rules." The room absorbed that sentence in silence. Elias looked at the floor again, feeling the familiar ache of being explained correctly only after being handled wrongly. He had known men like Callahan in different uniforms, different offices, different decades. Men who believed dignity from a black man was a challenge, who called questions attitude, who used authority like a mirror and became angry when it showed them something ugly. But Elias also saw Turner standing straighter now, saw the dispatcher entering times, saw the case still sealed. Truth was not repairing everything, but it was refusing to disappear. Colonel Shaw continued. "I am also notifying State Police Internal Affairs Liaison Captain Luis Ramirez. He will request copies of the arrest report, holding room video, property inventory, body camera footage, and any attempt to access secured materials." Callahan's face tightened as if each item removed another piece of the room from his control. "That is unnecessary. That will be determined by review, she said. The line clicked faintly, then held. Callahan looked toward Elias through the glass. For the first time that morning, his eyes did not carry command. They carried calculation. He walked to the holding room door, keys in hand, and opened it with more force than necessary but less confidence than before. Elias stood slowly. Turner stepped forward and unlocked the cuffs with careful hands. "Mr. Brooks," Turner said, voice low, "I am sorry I did not ask the right questions sooner." Elias rubbed one wrist gently, not to display pain, only to return feeling to his hand. "Next time," he said, "ask them before a phone call makes it safe." Turner lowered his eyes. Callahan brought the locked case from the desk and set it on the counter between them. "Your property," he said, clipped and stiff. Elias looked at the case, then at the inventory sheet. "Read the release condition into the record." Callahan stared at him. Turner picked up the sheet. "Black locked briefing case, Federal transport seal intact, sealed document pouch unopened, clearance badge returned, itinerary returned, property released to Elias Brooks at 10:42 in the morning." Colonel Shaw's voice came once more through the speaker. "Mr. Brooks, a federal vehicle is being rerouted to Millstone County. Please remain available for secure transport." Elias took the badge and case, his movements calm, his face unchanged. He did not thank Callahan for returning what should not have been taken. He did not raise his voice for the deputies who had watched. He only looked once at the campaign photographs behind the sheriff's desk, at all those frozen smiles built on promises of law and order, and then back at the sealed case in his hand. "Make sure the report says attitude," Elias said quietly. "That is the word that started this." The office had no answer for him. Captain Luis Ramirez arrived at the Millstone County Sheriff's Office 20 minutes after Colonel Shaw's call, not with flashing lights or raised voice, but with a leather folder, a state police badge, and the kind of calm that made excuses sound smaller before they were spoken. By then, Elias Brooks stood near the front counter with the locked briefing case beside his right leg, the clearance badge clipped back to his jacket, and the sealed document pouch returned untouched. The cuffs were gone, but the memory of them had not left the room. Sheriff Callahan stayed behind his desk, pretending to read the arrest notes, while every person in the office understood he was reading the collapse of his own certainty. Deputy Turner had already printed the property inventory, the release record, the dispatch call log, and the first draft of the incident report. On the line marked reason for arrest, the word attitude sat there in black ink, plain and foolish, stripped of the authority Callahan had tried to give it. Ramirez entered, introduced himself to Colonel Shaw still on speaker, then looked at Elias with professional respect. "Mr. Brooks, before you leave, I need to confirm your property was returned sealed and your transport was interrupted without the case being opened." Elias placed the case on the counter, turning the seal toward him. "The seal is intact. The pouch was not opened. The badge and itinerary were returned at 10:42 in the morning." Ramirez nodded and wrote it down. "And your stated request before transport?" Elias looked toward Callahan, not with hatred, not even with satisfaction, but with the steady attention of a man who had watched truth survive a room built to shrink him. "I requested body camera preservation, a clear legal reason for detention, proper inventory, and lawful authority before any federal material was accessed." Turner spoke quietly from the booking desk. "That is accurate." Callahan's face tightened. He was being difficult from the beginning. Ramirez turned one page in his folder. "Difficult is not a charge." The sentence did not need volume. It made the campaign photographs behind the sheriff's desk look staged and thin. Colonel Shaw's voice came through the speaker again. "All body camera footage, holding room video, dispatch audio, property inventory, arrest notes, and lobby camera footage are to be preserved. Captain Ramirez, my office will send a formal request within the hour." "Understood," Ramirez said. He turned to Callahan. "Sheriff, until review is complete, do not edit, supplement, or replace any report without documenting the change and timestamp." Callahan leaned back, the chair creaking under him. "You are treating this like misconduct." Ramirez looked at the report. I am treating it like a man was arrested for a word that is not an offense. No one moved. The secretary stopped typing. A deputy near the coffee machine lowered his cup without drinking. Turner looked at Elias, and the apology in his face was deeper now because it understood its own lateness. Elias lifted the locked case from the counter. Sheriff Callahan, he said, voice quiet enough that the room had to listen. You had my badge, my itinerary, my sealed pouch, my request for verification, and a deputy asking for proper procedure. You did not need the Pentagon to know I was a person. Callahan opened his mouth, but nothing useful came out. Elias did not wait for it. Ramirez handed him a copy of the release record. Turner stepped forward with the car keys, placing them in Elias's palm instead of setting them on the counter. I am sorry, Turner said again. Elias closed his fingers around the keys. Then let the report stay honest. Outside, through the front window, a black Federal sedan pulled to the curb, quiet and clean under the late morning sun. Its driver stepped out and waited beside the rear door. Elias adjusted his jacket sleeve, picked up the sealed case, and walked toward the exit. Behind him, the office felt smaller than when he had entered, not because anyone had shouted, but because the record had finally taken up space. Elias Brooks stepped out of the Millstone County Sheriff's office into late morning light that felt too ordinary for what had just happened inside. The black Federal sedan waited at the curb with its engine running softly, dark windows reflecting the county flag above the building and the faded gold letters painted on the office door. Behind those windows, Sheriff Callahan remained at his desk with Captain Ramirez reviewing the first report, Colonel Shaw waiting for preserved records, Deputy Turner standing over the word attitude as if it had become heavier than ink. Elias did not look back right away. He stood on the sidewalk with the locked briefing case in his left hand, the federal transport seal still intact, the clearance badge resting against his charcoal jacket, and his car keys folded into his palm. The same wrists that had been held in cuffs less than an hour earlier now moved freely as he adjusted his sleeve, not to hide what happened, but to return himself to himself. Across the street, an older man paused beside a newspaper box. A woman pushed a stroller past the courthouse steps. The town continued in its small American rhythm, unaware that a room full of local power had just been made to answer for a word it thought could become a charge. The federal driver opened the rear door, but Elias did not enter immediately. His phone vibrated once in his pocket. Mara. He answered before the second ring. For a moment, he only listened to her breathe. I am all right, he said softly. He heard the quiet strength in her silence, the kind nurses carry after hearing too many people say they are fine when they are not. The case is sealed. I am being transported now. She did not ask if he was angry. She knew him better than that. Come home with your dignity intact, she said. Elias looked at the sheriff's office window, where Turner stood near the counter holding the release record. I am trying, he answered. When the call ended, he placed the phone back in his pocket and turned toward the sedan. Turner had stepped outside now, stopping a few feet from the door, holding a copy of the corrected property form. He did not call after Elias loudly. He simply lifted the paper once, a small promise that the record would not be softened after he left. Elias nodded. It was not forgiveness exactly. It was recognition that courage sometimes arrived late and still had work to do. Inside the office, the fluorescent lights flickered against the glass. One by one, the lobby lights went dimmer as the automatic timer shifted toward midday, making the campaign photographs on the wall harder to see from outside. Elias placed the locked briefing case on the sedan floor and slid into the back seat. The driver closed the door with a quiet seal of its own. As the car pulled away, Millstone County passed through the window in pieces. Diner sign, gravel lot, courthouse lawn, sheriff's cruiser parked too close to the curb, dust lifting behind a pickup truck. Elias rested one hand on the case, feeling the hard edge of the latch beneath his fingers. The case had never opened. The pouch had never been touched. The report would carry the word that started everything. Attitude. Not crime. Not evidence. just the name some men gave to dignity when it refused to bow. The sedan turned onto County Route 19 and headed north toward the coordination site. Behind him, the sheriff's office grew smaller in the side mirror until it was only brick, glass, and a flag moving above a door. Elias looked forward then, toward the road, toward the work still waiting, toward a truth that had not shouted once and still changed the room.